thing that I've been having a lot of fun with on the channel Discord, which you should definitely check out, link in the description below, got lots of awesome people in there, is been playing Historic Brawl on Arena. So, for those who are not in the Arena loop, last week Arena finally added Brawl to its roster of formats. But one thing that is not officially supported in the event queues is they also add the ability to do direct challenge of Historic Brawl. So, Brawl with all the cards that are on Arena. And I've been having a lot of fun with my friends playing some Historic Brawl. So it's essentially a format that is like everything about Brawl, like 60 card with a commander or with a legendary creature or planeswalker, but Ixalan forward. And it's been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of blast, and I've had a few people ask on the Discord, kind of like who've gotten the game a little bit later, who came in around like, I don't know, like the Guilds block or like M20 and like didn't really get a lot of cards before like what the current standard is. We're wondering like, okay, what are some good staples to pick up for playing some Historic Brawl? And thus, this video is here where I'm going through and just gonna find all of pretty much like my top choices, about 10 of each color, of some of the best cards for Historic Brawl to pick up and craft on Arena. And if any of you are interested in playing some Historic Brawl, check out the link to the Discord in the description below. We got a whole I have a set up a thing where it's like you just react to a roll and you can get the Brawl rank, which so whenever anyone's looking for a game of Brawl, I can just make Historic Brawl, I can just ping ya and be all ready to go. And yeah. So and even if you're not interested in Historic and just want to play normal Brawl, you do that here. You can also do it there. We have people who just play normal Brawl too, and that's awesome. But one thing I should note is that some of the criteria. So I'm only looking at Ixalan through M19. So that's Ixalan, Rivals of Ixalan, Dominaria, and M19 are the sets I'm looking at. I tried to shoo away from Mythics and stick to, I have to go for a lot of rares because that's where like a lot of the good value cards are at the rare slot. But try to find like commons and uncommons where I could. So that's exciting. Another thing is that I didn't really include the commanders that are good. Like Zakama is a very good and powerful commander. But like if you're gonna find a commander, it's gonna be on there. Any legendary creatures or planeswalkers I have on this list are because they're good in the 99. 59. It's the 99. It's still the 99. Even if it's not 99 other cards, it's in the 99. I'm just used to commander. But yeah, so commanders, only those sets, not that. Was there any other things? Yeah, no, I tried to shoo away from Mythics. I already said that. And if I think of anything else, I'll let you know. So we're going to start out here with the Colorless cards. These aren't really in particular order. It's kind of general set order for each like category. And Colorless first because they can go into any deck. And the first one up I got here is Conqueror's Galleon, which is an interesting little card. That is a 4-mana vehicle. That is a 2/10. But whenever it attacks, you exile it at the end of combat and flip it. It has crew 4. Notably, I would pretty much play this if my commander can crew it itself, where that crew 4 can be rough, but if I know that I have like a 5-drop commander that has at least 4 toughness, not toughness, power to crew this, then I want to run this. Otherwise it's going to be a bit too much of a liability. But flipping this is very powerful because it gives you a very powerful card on the flip side if you can crew it and get it in there. And that is Conqueror's Foothold. On top of being just absolutely gorgeous art, it's just a colorless land. You can pay 2 and tap it to loot, 4 and tap it to just draw a card, and 6 and tap it to regrowth something from your graveyard. So it really adds this like in-game It's essentially this nice card advantage engine that requires a little bit of setup, but gives you essentially a very good Arch of Raska. And that's what we're kind of going here. But like, obviously, I remember my two other clarifications for this. I'm focusing on Arena Standard right now, or Arena Historic Brawl, which does not have multiplayer currently. So it is focused on 1v1. So it's gonna be a lot more focused decks, a lot more like, it's not so much like, okay, let's have fun drilling around in multiplayer. And some cards that are better in multiplayer, things like Dowsing Dagger, aren't gonna make it onto here just because it's not really like we're focusing on 1v1, because multiplayer is, while on its way, is still a while out. So we're focusing on 1v1 here for the time being. And furthermore, I am also focusing on cards that are good and generic in a lot of different decks. There are probably many cards that are like very good for a few specific commanders that are just insane in that. I have not included them. Or even just going as far as to archetypes, it's just gonna be very generic cards that like, these are staples that you don't feel bad for crafting them because they can go into many different decks. And honestly, it's also because it's singleton, the actual like opportunity cost for just buying a card with a wild card is not very high. It's not like you're spending a whole playset of like rare wild cards on a thing for standard. You're only going like one wild card deep for most of these cards, and it's not the end of the world. So yeah, but Conqueror's Foothold, also notably like late game, if the game does go long, it does essentially cap your commander's tax Act 6, because it's like, after you've cast it 3 times, you just have it go to your graveyard, you regrowth it, and you can cast it again. And notably you don't have to do it that turn, you can alternate it turns if you're really struck on mana, so it has that kind of like nice ceiling to your commander, so you're never really permanently locked out of your commander. Next we have Thematic Compass, which is a 2-mana artifact, but you may pay 3 and tap it to essentially tutor for a basic. So it fixes your mana, it makes you help your land drops on time. One thing I'll have to note for a lot of these cards and how you build your decks is, like in Commander, it's going to be very meta dependent. Like, is your group that you're playing a lot of Historic Commander with, are you playing a lot of aggro decks? Are they playing on the big count? Are people playing like Gideon White Weenie, things like that, where maybe you don't have time to be drilling around with Thematic Compass? Or are you much slower, and cards like this can really help fix your mana and do other things. So it'll depend on how everything shakes out and how like reactive you need to be in the early game. But if you don't have to be super reactive, this can really set you up for a very nice late game. Because we'll find your lands, it'll fix your mana. Because I mean, mana still is not great. Like, it's better in Historic Brawl than it is in normal Brawl, but anything like playing 5-color decks is rough. And even 3-color decks can be a little bit dicey at times. But if you have 7 or more lands at the beginning of your instep, it flips into a Maze of Ith, which is very powerful. Against both like aggro decks, almost not as much, because like most aggro decks are going to be going a bit wider. It's not really one creature unless they're playing Voltron, but it does do a good job of just like protecting yourself from like your control opponents, like big finishers. So it has like a nice duality where it's like, you're never sad to have a Maze of Ith on your side of the board. Like, yeah. And next up onto artifacts that smooth out your stuff is Treasure Map, the staple of Jank Brews and Standard for its entire tenure. But essentially you can pay, it's 2-mana artifact that you can pay 1 and tap it to scry 1, and after you do it 3 times, you make a bunch of treasure. And it turns into Treasure Cove, which allows you to start sacking those treasures to draw extra cards. It's mostly just a card selection and card draw engine, and that's all it is. And honestly, it slots into almost any deck. Like, even like faster decks don't mind kind of like smoothing out their draws a bit, and slower decks don't like it for just kind of like finding their answers and digging through that and like having a little bit ramped on the upside. Vanquisher's Banner, like, if you're the kind of person who likes to play tribal decks, like, I adore playing tribal, these generic tribal pieces are amazing, because honestly, since we really haven't, like, unless you're playing like knights or elementals, we haven't really had that great tribal support since Ixalan that like really makes a tribe go. They're really gonna need some of these generic tribal cards, and there aren't that many of them right now on Arena. But Vanquisher's Banner is honestly one of the better ones. It's an anthem, and also just being able to get that card draw engine, which tribal decks are usually a bit more creature-based and don't necessarily have the best card draw built into them, unless they have a tribe that or commander that supports it, like Kumena. But yeah, so if you're the person who likes tribal, like Vanquisher's Banner, it's hard to go wrong because it really goes into most decks. Because your curve is a bit higher, and typically, like, most tribal decks at this point, like in this, because the games do go a little bit longer, and it just does help those kind of like tribal aggro strategies get that little bit of extra reach by chaining creatures together and whatnot. And also typically, because it's like you always have access to your commander, that like, it does usually also staple onto itself when you cast your commander, draw a card. And the first mythic, and like I said, I'm trying to shy away from mythic unless it's like a mythic that's like, yes, this goes into many decks, and it's insane. The Immortal Sun is one of those. It's a 6-mana legendary artifact that does everything. 1, players cannot activate Planeswalker's loyalty abilities. Notably, I would not run this if your commander's a Planeswalker. It's kind of a nombo. Or if you're running lots of Planeswalkers. If you're running like 1 or 2 in your deck, it's fine to run the Immortal Sun side by side. You just don't play it when you know you don't need it. But shutting down your opponent's Planeswalkers, because it's like, they are powerful in long game, and there's lots of powerful Planeswalkers out there. Hey, you cannot turn the Immortal Sun into an Elk. But it draws an extra card every turn, makes everything cheaper, and it pumps your whole team. And it protects, shuts down some of the other things, so any creature-based strategy loves this card. And really, any non-Planeswalker strategy loves this card, so yeah. And then for another mythic, and that is Karn, Scion of Urza. This is the one that either, like, +1, your opponent chooses one of the top 2 cards and puts in your hand, and the other one goes in exile, and you can get those back later. But just as a colorless card draw spell. And also you can make constructs, which is fine. But as kind of a colorless draw spell, so if you are playing like red or white or Boros, and you need some of that late game card draw, Karn's got ya. He doesn't cost any colors. Not much else to say. He's just like, yep, it's a colorless draw spell. There you go. And he's pretty good. I mean, he also protects himself when he needs to. It's obviously, it's even better in artifact decks, because like those constructs can actually become serious business if you have like a decent amount of like treasure or other artifacts on the board. So yeah, it's Karn. Everyone loves Karn. And Blackblade Reforged, which is honestly probably one of the best pieces of equipment on Arena right now. It's a 2-mana legendary artifact, and it has equip 7, but you're mostly using this to equip to your commander or other legendaries you have, and that only has equip 3 to them. And it just gives +1/+1 for each land you control. So late game, this is turning your commander into like a serious threat. Even though there isn't commander damage on a Brawl, it is still exceptionally powerful. Like, obviously you want to have a commander that has some form of evasion, either in the form of flying or trample or that sort of thing. But it does just like allow it to just, it is something that needs to be dealt with, or it does make your commander just way more menacing. And typically you are running a few more legendary creatures than you might in a normal thing. Like, obviously not good if you're running a Planeswalker commander, but if you're any sort of person who likes to just also swing with your commander, it's real nice. It also is nice because it really makes your commander kind of impenetrable in combat, so you can actually attack your commander and not worry about it dying. Gilded Lotus, for non-green decks that want to ramp, it's just a 5-mana artifact that ramps you for 3, and I mean, part of these like slower drawn out games that you can do things that have plans and stuff that require large amounts of mana, and Gilded Lotus lets you do that, where it's just like, okay, let's just like pay my, like, here's just a big ramp spell, here, do your thing. And if you're not in green, this is pretty much the best like big ramp spell you have currently in command on Arena, and there's not much to say. It goes into any deck. Probably not green decks. You have better options in green decks, but yeah. And honestly, I think that in 1v1, Helm of the Host is a tad too slow because of its price of 4 and equip of 5, but it is an equipment that, as being a combat hunter, you get to duplicate whatever it's wearing, and it makes it non-legendary if it was legendary. So, you can put this on your commander, and all of a sudden you have 2 of your commander. There's very few commanders who don't want more than one of them. Don't put this on Phage, even though Phage isn't on. That is probably the one answer where the commander does not want this. Like, obviously you don't want this if you're playing like a, but like anything that cares about ETB effects, and it's also very good with, literally also, unlike a lot of things, the token doesn't go away. Token is around forever until it dies. It's not kind of like, oh, it's not like a Splinter Twin. So it just like lets you do that. Notably, this does let you copy Gideon. Like if you give Gideon as your commander, it will make a new Gideon. Granted, when at the end of Gideon will stop being a creature, you have to re-equip it, but you can start getting multiple Gideons in the battlefield. Some of them just won't be legendary, but you can do that. But yeah, so also Sarkhan. Sarkhan can do that too. Well, I guess of Tarkhan, you could technically duplicate any Planeswalker, because he can turn all of your Planeswalkers into dragons, and then you can repel on the coast. I need to do this at some point. But it is very expensive, so it might not be great, but honestly, you're playing Historic Command, or Historic Brawl, because you just want to have fun with your friends, and this allows for a lot of fun and dumb situations, and it's just it's a pet card I have of mine in Brawl. I guess it's our commander. I guess it's not really a pet card if it's like recognized to be a good card, but I just love it. And finally, for the artifacts runs, we have Chaos Wand from M19. This is a 3-mana artifact. You can pay 4 and tap it, and your target opponent, which will be your opponent, because you only have one opponent right now, exiles cards until they hit an instant or sorcery, and then you get to cast that instant or sorcery. Now, in like this format, people are running very fancy, very splashy, like instant sorceries. It's usually like good removal, good ramp, like other powerful things, and you just get to steal them and cast them for free. Also, it's just a great feeling getting to steal your opponent's stuff. So it's just like a fun one. Like, I like any cards that like lets you play with your opponent's deck, and for any sort of control strategy, it's quite solid. The most beautiful feeling is when you trigger activate this, response to your opponent's spell, and you get their own counter spell and counter their spell with their counter spell that you drew from their deck. That is a beautiful feeling. Now we're just gonna talk about lands. The obvious answer here for lands is the dual lands. The dual lands are very good. It's very low opportunity cost to pick them up. Like when Historic actually starts running queues and stuff, you're gonna want to pick up the lands anyway. If you're just pinning like 10 wild cards instead of 40 for full playsets, if you just want to get one of each, you can't go wrong. You'll use them. They're in Ixalan and Dominaria, and yeah, they're lands. And then for actual utility lands, Field of Ruin, it's a nice uncommon they pick up. Like a lot of the ones I mentioned here are actually like the Ixalan and Rifles flip lands, and those are very powerful lands that need to get destroyed. And on top of other culprits like, I don't know, Field of Ruin, Field of the Dead, that you might want to kill, and Field of Ruin kills it. Unclaimed Territory. Again, it's just kind of one of those generic whatever tribal support cards that if you like playing tribal, you can't go wrong with an Unclaimed Territory. And honestly, even if you're not playing tribal, if you have any sort of like mana intensive commander like Niv Mizzet Reborn, that like you really want to hit all its colors, it may not be a terrible idea to run an Unclaimed Territory just because it's like Niv Mizzet Reborn, you name like Dragon, and most of your like very like tight mana costs is in casting Niv Mizzet, because otherwise you're playing two colors. This lets you kind of really smooth that out and be like, okay, this is the second command tower for my commander. Archer Froska. It is kind of like a good for any deck that you're running, probably like 2 or less colors and aren't really having trouble with mana. It's just like, it's a colorless land that just late game becomes just a mana sink to draw cards, and you know what, sometimes you want those mana sinks, but if you're running 3 or more colors, I probably won't run it just because you don't want to hurt your, I don't think it's quite good enough to start really hurting your mana base. Staple of Commander, we have Reliquary Tower, which was in M19, that just, it's a colorless land that just removes your maximum mana size. Granted, you're going to want to be in a color that you know that you can draw a lot of cards. Like if you're playing Boros, maybe you don't want the Reliquary Tower. But if you're in a control deck and you should be drawing a lot of cards, it is nice sometimes to not have to discard to hand size. And if your mana base can take it, Reliquary Tower is just A+. And finally we have Rupture Spire. And this sort of card is definitely one that is meta dependent. Whereas if you are playing a meta that is like very fast and very beat down, and you are trying to play these very aggressive decks, Rupture Spire is very clunky. And honestly, it's so clunky, I would not run this in 3 colors. I would only run this if you're playing 5 color. And that said, it is just very clunky. But it will get the job done for fixing your mana. But I'm still not a fan of it. It is essentially a Gateway Plaza, except it's not a gate, so it is a strictly worse Gateway Plaza. But yeah, it's there if you need it. Alright, on to white. First up we have Ixalan's Binding, which is 3 and a white for enchantment, and it's essentially a Conclave Tribunal that doesn't have Convoke. So, and like, you'll use these, like, just like these O-ring effects that hit anything. You want redundancy, you can't have your full 4 like Conclave Tribunals if you're running white or like white X, and you want that removal. And sometimes you'll just run Ixalan's Binding. There's also Hieromancer's Cage in M19 that does the same thing. And this one has the upside of just shutting down any like rats or Petitioner Spires, just by essentially shutting them out of the game completely. Kinjali Sunwing, which is a 3-mana 2/3 with flying, that causes your creatures to enter the battlefield, your opponent's creatures to enter the battlefield tapped. Honestly, this is both good for both control and aggro strategies, because on like the control, like it shuts down any haste enablers. All their haste creatures are all of a sudden useless to them. And on aggro, it means like they can't set up blockers as well, where it's like, okay, we set up all these blockers. No, you can't. We just keep going in, and it's like, it takes an extra turn to have their blockers online, which can really help that beatdown. And it itself is a 2 power in the air for a 3 mana, and its stats aren't terrible. Legion's Landing, which is a 1 mana legendary enchantment that makes a 1/1. And then when you attack with 3 or more creatures, you get to transform it. And I did not put a transformation on, but it's a Danto, the first fort. It can tap for 1 white, or you can pay 2 and a white to untap it to make a 1/1 of lifelink. It was a staple in Celestia, I know this card. But notably this is here because it is a way to ramp in mono white, or like Boros, or any sort of like, if you're playing any sort of aggressive strategy, this thing provides like late game inevitability and well, not inevitability, but like late game board presence, where it's like you can always spend 4 total mana, including itself, to make another guy, while also just like, if you can, like, go with the dream draw of like Legion's Landing into Raise the Alarm into like flip it turn 3, untap, like, and have 4 mana ready to go turn 3. Like, that's not something that mono white really gets to do. And also just like doing that and having a board presence on turn 4. So it's really one of those cards that really lets mono white do good and mono white things, whilst like progressing their board state and preparing that late game inevitability. We got Settle the Wreckage, which is the 4-mana board wipe, which exiles all attacking creatures. But then they get to search for basics equal to that number of creatures, and honestly, I feel like Settle is almost more of isn't the great board wipe. I would rather have more of the preemptive board wipes because we have a little bit more of them available, and because I feel like in Brawl, and especially Historic Brawl, when you play this against Standard, when you played this against Standard against the aggro player, you settled them, they lost all their stuff, they didn't, like, unless you're playing Celestine and can march in the multitudes, they're not doing anything with that mana. But in Brawl, they do have mana sinks for that mana. They do have those, like, in-game inevitabilities and, like, mana sinks, and if nothing else, that's more mana to, like, start casting their commander a few more times. And it's an iffiness where it's like, if you want another board wipe, you can run it, and it is still very good. It's also very good if you want a board wipe, and you yourself are a very creature-based deck, so you don't necessarily want to wipe your side of the board. Also, it's one of those ones where it's like, if you want to psychologically hit your opponent, where like your opponent knows they have Settled the Wreckage, and you can like bluff having Settled the Wreckage, so there's that like metagame political advantage of being like, yes, I'm holding up 4 mana and 2 white. So there's some stuff there, but I wouldn't put it at the top tier of board wipes currently available in Historic Brawl. Next we got Tokalti Honor Guard, which is a 2-mana 1/3 that stops ETB effects. It's essentially like, it's a smaller Hushbringer, but if any deck that wants a Hushbringer, where it's like, if you're a deck that doesn't really use ETB effects, so many creatures do nowadays, like so many of them, and this can just instantly shut down a lot of your opponent's stuff, where it's like, if you're playing any sort of like control deck, or even mid-range, like, although mid-range usually is using their ETB effects, but if you look at your deck and you're like, I actually don't really use that many ETB effects, seriously consider putting Tokalti Honor Guard and also Hushbringer into your deck, because it could just suddenly just wreck so many commanders and like so many playstyles, and just like incidentally, and just like, yes, all of your stuff is meaningless now. But yeah. Next up we have another one of the generic, like, I think it's the last of like the generic tribal cards in this list, which is Radiant Destiny, which is a 3-mana enchantment that is just an anthem that, if you also have the City Blessing, it gives them Vigilance. But it's just a cheap anthem for whatever your tribe of choice is, and there's not much else to say. Next we have another board wipe. We have Urza's Ruinous Blast that exiles all non-land permanents that aren't legendary. Again, this isn't my favorite one. We haven't gone to my favorite board wipe in Standard right now, but it doesn't hit your opponent's commander, which is unfortunate. But the reason I have this on here is that because it exiles. It is currently the only exile board wipe we have. And if you're finding that like if your meta has a lot of graveyard decks and that sort of things, this can be very good to get rid of creatures for good. But that not hitting your opponent's like legendary stuff is a liability. But if you are also running like kind of like a legendary like base build, like either Kethis or and whatnot, it's obviously very good there. And also it's non-land permanence, so it does hit everything. So it is kind of this like it's a tweaked version of Planar Cleansing. Also notably, it's only 1 devotion to white, and Planar Cleansing, oftentimes you don't have the ability to like really commit all 3 white. Like 3 white, like Planar Cleansing is almost unplayable outside of 2 color, currently with the mana we have available to us. Then we have Cleansing Nova, which is my preferred board wipe in this format, which is 3 white for either destroy all creatures or destroy all enchantments and artifacts. And I just love the modality of this, where it's like almost all players are playing like very powerful like artifacts and enchantments, and some of them are playing creatures, and you don't necessarily know which ones you want to hit, like which side is going to like destroy all permanents. If you're playing control, it can cripple you as much as your opponent, because it's like, okay, you've lost all your mana rocks and all your control enchantments. But sometimes you also want to have the option to take out all of your opponents, because it's like, oh, my opponent, the control player, got all of their enchantments and artifacts and engine pieces going, and I haven't, and I want to reset them. And the modality is just very powerful here, and it's probably my favorite board wipe in the format right now. And it's like also white has all these board wipes, and I know that it's kind of white's thing, but it's like, oh, big finger slim for all the other colors currently in a Arena Historic. Or, no, Historic Brawl, that's what it's called. Yeah. Then we have Mentor of the Meek, which is 2 and a white for 2/2. And this is kind of that small, I think any sort of token deck loves this, because whenever a small creature in battlefield, you can pay 1 and draw a card. And it's a way to draw cards in a way that white doesn't normally have access to. And white likes this card and likes these effects, and Mentor of the Meek, A+. Not much to say. Like, if you're playing any sort of like white weenie or beatdown or token deck, you love this card. And finally, for white, we have Remorseful Cleric, which is a 2/2/1 flyer. You can sack it to exile all cards into the player's graveyard. And this is here because graveyard hate is important. Like, your meta may not have that many graveyard decks, but having an option is nice to have. It's also 2/1 flyer for 2, which is like really solid as like on the beatdown. And also it's notable to say, like, if you are playing kind of more control, these early game creatures are very nice, because it's like, this is very good at like pressuring planeswalkers and things like that, where it's sometimes you want to like take them out with like this thing where it's like you gotta kill those Teferis and Okos somehow, and Remorseful Cleric does a pretty good job of that. So onto blue, we have starting out with a Charter Course, which it's just a classic blue draw spell, and honestly it's just, I mean, in like the modern era, it's one of the best blue card spells I think they've printed, and it's just kind of like 2 mana, draw 2 cards, and sometimes you discard a card, but normally you don't care. But it's just like, it's a nice efficient blue card draw spell that honestly most blue decks don't mind having. Entrancing Melody, which is X blue, taking control of target creature of CMC X. Gaining control of your opponent's creatures is one of the few ways to really get rid of a commander, where it's, sure, they don't like, if your opponent, like, you can remove it, but they can just cast it. You know when they can't recast it? When you control their commander. And even then, it's just like, for any sort of like pump it, like, it's a removal spell, and also gives you a creature, and these effects are quite powerful. Entrancing Melody is a nice flexible one, where sometimes you just want to steal their utility or creature or mana dork, and other times you just, it's like late game and you want to steal their finisher, and it lets you both remove it and take it for yourself, and that's good, fun fact. Reverse Rebuke is next, because you know what's a good card in Commander? Cyclonic Rift, and this is as close as we're gonna get. And in 1v1, sure, it's not instant speed, which is obviously much worse, but it is very good. It's return all non-land permanents, not just creatures, target player controls to their owner's hand. This is just a huge tempo play, where it's like, it allows you, either if you're winning this turn because you're like push all those blocks out of the way and I swing in and I win, or otherwise it's like you're going to spend your next few turns just rebuilding your board and giving me a few turns to stabilize and turn around and squeeze out that win, where honestly there's very few blue decks that can't make use of this effect. So, very adore Reverse Rebuke. Now classic, it's obvious, Search for Visconta's on this list because it's Search for Visconta. If you're playing any sort of control deck, you want Search for Visconta. Honestly, if you're playing blue, you want Search for Visconta. Search for Visconta is a good card. It's a very good card. As long as you're not playing like blue, like Merfolk aggro, you probably want Search for Visconta. Let's be honest here. It turns into this thing. This thing's gross. If you're playing any sort of control deck, you really want this thing. It's Search for Visconta. It's almost like it was a staple and standard for its entire tenure. Yep, it's Search for Visconta. But going back on the theme of just getting a lot of mana to have big plays, Spell Swindle. It is a 5 mana counterspell that turns that spell that you counter CMC into treasure. So it allows you to just like hold back, counter a big thing, and essentially turn that onto mana that you can use later. And yes, it is a very expensive counterspell, but it does allow you to have these very big plays. There's not many cards like the fact that the treasure means like you get to keep that mana around for a while and you get to use it later whenever you want and need it. And there's a lot of turns where it's like, especially in Brawl, where it's like if you're playing something like a Layla or something like that, where it's like I want to both cast my commander and also be able to cast some other things to get value of my commander, because I don't want to cast my commander and have no mana up to be able to like do anything and just have it removed and I just spent my entire time for nothing and now my commander costs more. And I want to get my value, and having that extra mana on that turn can really help. So, Spell Swindle, I adore. Wonderful, beautiful, yeah. Next we have Flood of Recollection, which is blue, and it returns an instant sorcery from your graveyard to your hand. It's very simple, but honestly, I think it's very easy to overlook that this is a very powerful effect, and most sorceries you put in your deck, you wouldn't mind casting again if you're playing any sort of like blue deck that is running a fair amount of instant sorceries, which isn't unlikely if you're like not playing like 3 or more colors. If you're playing like 1 or 2 colors and one of those colors is blue, you're probably running lots of instants and sorceries, and getting them back to use again is probably a thing you want to do. For honestly a relatively cheap cost too. Also, you get to see Jace with a headache, so that's cool. Extra bonus, headache chase. Next we have a nice just control finisher, which is Nezahal Primal Tide. It's 5 blue for a 7/7 that can't be countered. It has a reliquary test stapled onto it. When your opponents cast non-creature spells, you draw cards, and you can discard parts of your hand to essentially blink it so it can dodge removal too. Where it's just like it's nice control finisher, and honestly it's like control needs to kill you eventually, and for any deck that includes blue, like this is a real solid one. Also, it looks sweet. It's giant underwater dinosaur, and you can't say no to that. On the topic of stealing people's stuff, Impulse's Clutch is a nice just flat rate 6 mana, that thing's mine, and yeah, there's not much to say. 6 mana, remove opponent's commander, you also have their commander. Sounds pretty good. That's a pretty good deal. Karn's Temporal Sundering, which is a 6 mana legendary sorcery that is take an extra turn. Notably, I didn't include on this list is Nexus Fate, and Nexus Fate is like very similar to this and is obviously pretty decent. Fun fact. But also it gets to bounces 1/9 permanent to your opponent's turn, and extra turn spells are very like nice and flashy and cool and stuff, and many decks can take advantage of them. Obviously, if you have any sort of planeswalker commander, this is where like this shines because you get that extra turn of value out of it. But even creature decks don't mind like having that extra combat step, and yes, it is a bit of an expensive one, but also in commander, 6 mana isn't as your entire turn as it is, say, in standard. So, Karn's Temporal Sundering, very solid card. It is a legendary sorcery, but I haven't mentioned that for the other card. I think by Urza's Ruined Bass, I didn't mention it because it's like, you have a commander, you always have like access to cast a legendary to cast these legendary sorceries. And next we have Patient Rebuilding, which is a 5 mana enchantment that at the beginning of your upkeep, target opponent mills 3, and you draw a card for each land card up in your graveyard. This is another one of those like control finishers actually, and that's like Brawl games go long, and even if you're in a mill deck, this is both a card advantage engine that kind of pushes you towards a mill victory, where it's like, you know what, like, if you can just stall the board of patron building on board, you eventually will just win, and while also gaining card advantage while you're at it. Like, obviously it's not as good if your meta is playing a lot of graveyard decks and stuff like that when you don't want to be filling their graveyard, but that said, like, even for non-mill decks, any sort of control like deck adores patron building, honestly, because kind of this dual purpose thing, which like does speed your opponent to their death and they have to kill you eventually. Okay, next we're on black, and we're opening up with Argyl's Bloodfast, and it's a 2-mana enchantment. It can also pay 1 black to pay 2 life to draw a card. So this is mostly here for like any black deck that isn't really running blue or any of the other cards, doesn't really have that access to match card draw, is that it's no greed, but it's not too far away from greed, and having like you start with more life, and if your opponent, if like obviously if you are in a very fast meta, maybe don't run this, but just having that ability to turn your life into a resource I think is very useful, and I had something else to say about this card. The flip side isn't. Oh, I didn't even put the flip side on. The flip side lets you like sacrifice creatures to gain life equal to their toughness, which is fine. But I'm mostly just using this here as a card draw engine for black, where it's like any excess mana you have, you can spend it to turn into card draw. And if you're in like a 4-color and you don't feel like running like Forbidding Fruit, and like because you're playing like mono black or like black red or black white, and you need some card draw, Argyl's Bloodfast is honestly something I think you should look at. Also, if you're playing any sort of life gain strategy, it is a solid like place to put your life that you're gaining and actually turn it into a resource and turn that life into cards. Next up we have Quaitsail Freebooter, which is 2-mana 1/2 flyer that lets you like temporarily steal some from your opponent's hand, and honestly just early game disruption I think is very important. I think it's undervalued in these sort of formats where people are thinking like, oh, let's just think about the long game, let's think about this big control finishes, but like early game, like Quaitsail Freebooter, take a piece of ramp, take their key like removal spell, like start playing other things, take your counter spell to do other things, where it's just like getting that early game disruption, just put them on their back foot, especially for things like black red aggro or like Mardu aggro, but even just like control mirrors, it's not terrible. And it's like typically you're going to be taking something that they want, so they're going to have to spend a removal spell on this, where it's just like it gets its value worth out of it. Also, you get to peek at your like just the value of getting to look at your opponent's hand and see what they're doing, and then also just having a nice evasive threat to do things like pressure planeswalkers and whatnot is very nice too. Vraska's Contempt is just a very efficient removal spell. Not much else to say. It's just a good removal spell. Yeah. Duskleaping Zealot doesn't look like much, but 2-mana 1/1 that draws you a card. It's one of those cards which looks very unassuming, but it's actually real solid, and you can't really go wrong with it. It's like, you know, especially in like fast formats where it's like if you're like your opponent is like if you're in a meta that is pretty much beat down, like if this can trade for like an X1 or like jump some damage while also training you a card, honestly like control decks want that. And also kind of the beat down that doesn't mind just like, okay, here's another body that I can throw in and start moving sideways. And let's be honest, you're not doing that much impactful stuff on turn 2 anyway in this format, and just getting a body down that replaces itself isn't the end of the world. Next we have Golden Demise, which is kind of like Cry of the Carnarium, but if you have the City's Blessing, it is only a one-sided one. So it's one to look at if you're playing like, I don't know, like some sort of like Abzan Token Steal, or if you're just a deck that kind of wants a second Cry of the Carnarium, because it's like it is singleton, you want redundant effects that are similar, and Gold Minimize is there as kind of this like mini black board wipe, especially since like if you're not playing white, you don't really have access to board wipes in this format. Next would be a Ravenous Chupacabra, which is a murder stapled to a dog thing. It's a Chupacabra. I don't know if they're supposed to be dogs. They're kind of like hyena-ish, I guess. Chupacabras, they're beast horrors, but you know, like for any sort of like it's good removal, and if you have any sort of recursion or that sort of thing, or care about creatures, it's obviously good. It's also just 2 power and also killing creature. I don't need to tell you that Ravenous Chupacabra is good. It's a good card. Not much to say. And the Twilight Prophet, which is a 4-mana 2/4 flyer, and if you have the City's Blessing, you can essentially draw an extra card at your turn, but that extra card also drains your opponent. And it's just one of those, like, in-game, like, your opponent has to deal with this. Like, it is a threat that your opponents have to answer, and honestly, aggro doesn't mind this as like a top end, just being like to have that reach to finish your opponent off, and control stuff like doesn't mind it either because it is a decent blocker, and it will just kind of like drain your opponent out, and it's just like it has card advantage, it has reach. I mean, in the game terms, and it's not actual reach because it's flying, so it, like, functions as if it had reach, but you know what I'm saying. But it's just a little bit of everything that a lot of decks kind of want. And that's kind of why I'm going for this list of where it's like, even if you're playing black, man, there's not many decks that like don't hate Twilight Prophet unless you're like your 4-drop slot is very clogged. Oh, we have the Eldest Reborn, which is a 5-mana saga that will get significantly better once we have multiplayer, because all its modes are each opponent. But first one is just Edict. Each opponent sacks a creature or planeswalker. Then everyone discards a card. And then finally, you get to reanimate something, and then it's reanimating creature or planeswalker. So it's just like, it's just value. Like, it's a bit slow, it's a bit expensive, but it's just like the amount of value you get over this. Like, it is a 3-for-1 overtime. And yeah, sure, you take out like the worst creature, you take the worst card, but then you get the best thing from their yard or your yard. And yeah, no, it's just value all around. And for another saga, we have the Phyrexian Scriptures, which is the only board wipe in black we currently have. The only real board wipe. And that is, the first one is, it puts a +1/+1 counter on something, it makes an artifact, and it destroys all non-artifacts, and then it wipes everyone's graveyards. It's really weird, but if you really are not in white and you're in a control deck that wants a board wipe, here's your Black Damnation. This is the closest you're going to get in the current format, at least until we have Amonkhet and Hour of Station when we have Bantu's Last Reckoning. This is what you have so far. Have fun. I'm sorry. And then for black, we have Stitcher Supplier, which is just a fun little girl. And by fun little girl, she's a zombie. Also not that little, she looks to be a zombie made of adults. At least one adult. But it's just very efficient at filling up your graveyard. Many commanders want things in your graveyard. Graveyard decks are a thing, and honestly there's very few things in Standard that fill up a graveyard with the efficiency of Stitcher Supplier. And certainly not any 1-drops. It's not like we have Satyr Warrior Finder, it's like this and Glowspore Shaman, and she does it very well. On to red, we have Captain Lanaray's Storm, which is a 3-mana 2/2 with haste. That whenever she attacks, you make a treasure. So for any sort of like white or red aggro deck, or like Boros or Mardu, or anything like that, like this is one that like it gets in, and also ramps you at the same time. Also, she gets power increases if you sack a treasure. So yeah, no, I just like her. She does everything that red wants to do, and this sort of thing where it's like get extra mana, come and swinging. Like it's a 3-mana 2/2, but it's fine. But it has haste, so that's decently. They're not counting on that. And I mean, if you really need to, it's coming down as like a 3-mana 3/2 haste, and that's real solid. So Captain Lanaray's Storm, just like any sort of beatdown red deck wants this. Fiery Cannonade. It's essentially a Flame Sweep #2 for those decks that want that redundancy. Star of Extinction is the only red board wipe we currently have. It is a 7-mana sorcery that destroys target land and does 20 damage to each creature and Planeswalker. It is notably a board wipe that also takes out Planeswalkers, which only like Planar Cleansing does. It also takes out land, so you can really stick it to that Field of Ruin. Not Field of Ruin, Field of the Dead. Yeah. Bye-bye dinosaurs. One of my favorite enchantments in recent Magic history, Sunbird Syndication. This thing is like the staple, like the classic, like... When we get proper multiplayer, there'll still be a red deck that I build that will not include Sunbird Syndication. Just because this enchantment's dumb and I love it. Because if you do enchant untap with this thing, it's just nuts. 6-mana enchantment, and whenever you cast a spell from your hand, reveal X cards from the top of your library, or X is its CMC, and you get to cast one of those spells if its CMC is X or less. So it kind of like doubles all of your spells for the rest of the game. And it's just real dumb. It lets you do really cool and dumb things. And I adore this card. Granted, it'll depend on the speed of your meta. Like, if you are running a little bit slower of a meta, you may not have time to play 6-mana enchantments that don't affect the board state. But if it is, oh, this thing, like, if you untap with this thing, you're very likely winning the game. So yeah. Vance's Blasting Cannons. We're back onto the maybe not running 6-mana do-nothing enchantments with another 4-mana do-nothing enchantment. But this one just provides some nice like game inevitability for red, where it's if you're playing like mono red or Boros and need that card advantage, Vance's Blasting Cannons has that. It's at Beaver Upgrade, you get to Impulse Draw, which is like the exile, and you can cast it this turn. And everyone's gonna have the spells in their deck. There's like this thing where it's if you cast 3 spells on a turn, you have to flip it. But honestly, just for its front side, it's real solid just for that, like, hey, do you want like if you need card draw in red, here you go. There's an enchantment that does it, and does it alright. If you do flip it, it turns into this land that lets you just bolt things for 3 mana, which is very good too, but it's a very different effect, and sometimes you do just want to keep the card advantage and not have just like Fireball Island. Speaking of like the cards that give us lots of mana to have big explosive turns the turn after, Brass's Bounty. It's a 7-mana sorcery that just makes treasures equal to the number of lands you control. Really, like, you want to have a deck that like really wants to have big explosive turns, but this really allows you to have, well, big explosive turns where you cast this like for 7 mana and you get to untap with 14 mana at least. And that's a lot of mana. I bet you could do some cool stuff. I bet you could even win a game with 14 mana, depending on what you have in your hand. You could cast like a Finale of Devastation for 14 or something like that. Or other dumb stuff, or cast some big X spell, or cast your commander and cast a bunch of things that synergize with it. What I'm saying is, there's lots of things that like a temporary like boost in mana, where kind of think of this kind of like as like a ritual that lets you keep that mana for later. So it's like a delayed ritual. So yeah. And also if you're also playing any sort of like artifact deck that like wants to benefit from having lots of like artifacts out, like, hey look, your constructs all of a sudden get +7/+7. That's cool. Next we have Direfleet Daredevil, which is the Snapcaster Mage, but for your opponent's stuff. Where it's you get to play it and you get to cast in sorcery from your opponent's graveyard. And you know, people are casting cool and since sorceries gonna be cool, you casting them. And it does it. It kind of also feels like whatever your deck's like weak spots are. Like if you are playing like mono red, like mono red doesn't mind this guy. Like 2 mana 2/1 for strike, like it's a pretty good beatdown creature. While also like sometimes you just want to like grab their card draw spell or their ramp spell and get it for yourself, and let's do that. Speaking of casting other people's stuff, Atali Primal Storm. 6 mana 6/6 that lets you cast things on top of your library. This is Brawl. People playing stupid overcosted stuff that costs 1 million mana. It'd be great casting stupid overcosted stuff for free. Whenever it attacks, you exile everyone's top card of the graveyard or library, You get to cast them for free. Also, he looks cool. Also, I like dinosaurs. How much I like dinosaurs? Dinosaurs are cool. But overall, just like Atali's just like very efficient at just like. Obviously, I prefer it in a deck which has haste enablers because it's like it doesn't if you're going at things that will like crashing drawbridges and what's its name, the Dominator that gives Riot, the enchantment that gives Riot, and things like that, like ways to give it haste, just so you can attack with it immediately. But if you can, it's just like this is the very thing that allows you to like kind of like have an instant kind of board state, assuming you flip lucky. But yeah. Speaking of things to spend lots of mana on, Banefire is just a very efficient version of that, where it's X in a red, it deals X damage to any target. Like, sometimes, like, early game, you just gotta, like, kill someone's, like, Teferi or Oko, and sometimes late game, you just do, like, cast Brass's Bounty, and then, like, you untap and you cast Banefire for 15, and kill your opponent, and you know what? It gets the job done. It's like, it's a fireball in a format where it's like, you just want to create lots of mana. A fireball is what you need to close out a game. And finally for red, we have Sarkhan's Unsealing, which is the 4-mana enchantment. Whenever you cast a creature with power 4, 5, or 6, it deals 4 damage to any target. And when you cast a creature with power 7 or greater, it deals 4 damage to each opponent and each creature or planeswalker they control. So granted, if you're in any sort of like creature-based deck, like especially like Gruul or like Jund or Naya, obviously it's like has a lot of good value. And also I'd say like if you have a commander that has power 7 or greater and you can get that big effect on your commander, I'd even look at running it, even if you're running that many other creatures that like really trigger this. But if you can just like essentially add like a small board wipe to whenever you cast your commander, not only does it give you a small board wipe when you cast your commander, it also makes your opponent second guess, like, do I really want to remove their commander when they could just cast it again and board wipe again and like do 4 to my face. It just like gives like a lot of just like big oomph to all of your creatures that you know, just taking off, like, Brawl is a format where it's like you can take off your 4-drop and it's not going to cost you the game, and all of a sudden like you're really hitting it hard for the rest of your creatures until this thing is removed. Speaking of big creatures, it's time to talk about green. Growing Light Civic Lamok. You play this, you get the commune effect, and if you get 4 more creatures on the board, I'm not sure what kind of deck would have 4 more creatures on the board. Green isn't good at putting out creatures on their board. Why would they ever do that? It turns into this card called Gaia's Cradle. Gaia's Cradle is a good card. It makes lots of mana. I could talk about many ways that you could use lots of mana to win a game. But for like essentially any sort of like, typically you want to be almost more of in a token strategy, but adding green for each creature control, like even if it's like only tapping for like 2 or 3, like that's still a pretty good ramp spell, and it already replaces itself when it comes down. That it's just real solid and goes into most green decks, unless you're just splashing green for like ramp or something like that. Path of Discovery, which is a 4-mana enchantment, and whenever a creature enters battlefield control, it explores. So this is very good for card selection, but also can just be used to just kind of like to just fill out your graveyard, because you can just like start dumping stuff in your graveyard to like any sort of like graveyard effects and things like that. It's actually kind of funny that like right now in Historic Brawl, green is better at filling its graveyard than black is. But that said, Path of Discovery is just like most green decks are running lots of creatures. You don't mind a Path of Discovery, and that's what this is about. It's like, if you're running green, you probably don't hate Path of Discovery. Speaking of filling your graveyard, World Chamber is a 4-mana 3/3 that whenever it attacks, you mill 3 of your deck, and when it dies, you get to put all land cards from your graveyard onto the battlefield. So it is kind of like this, like mass, like, what is it called? Ooh. Sylvan Reclamation? Is that what it's called? It was in Hour of Devastation. Was it? No. That was Eldritch Moon, wasn't it? Was it? It's the second effect. I know it was one of the, like, yeah. But yeah, no, it's that's gonna bother me, which was that goes from. But, yeah, so essentially it like supply, you obviously want to have a commander that cares about having your graveyard and things like that, but it helps fill your graveyard and also just like gets value of like both itself, milling itself, and also just like your other creatures, like other effects that have milled like lands in your graveyard, and give you that nice ramp boost to like even decks that don't really have like the big land outlets. Sometimes you do just gotta recast your commander for the 4th time, and that takes a lot of mana, and making a lot of mana is real nice. Grow from the Ashes is just a fun little ramp spell that it's not quite a circuitous route, but like sometimes you need a second circuitous route, and Grow from the Ashes is real solid. And also notably, it does not put up onto the battlefield tapped. They are untapped if you want to do fun shenanigans like that. I mean, it goes without saying, but Land of War Elves is a good card. Honestly, even Commander, like, sure, like, Mana Dorks, you typically want your Mana Dorks to be a bit higher, like, some of the better ones, but Land of War Elves is real solid as a ramp source to get yourself in that early game. Elvish Luminaire, like, isn't quite a Mana Dork, but it's kind of like similar where it's like, okay, I pay 3 mana, I rate myself a little bit, let's get really unlucky and brick. Oh, it feels so bad when you break with Elvish Luminaire. It feels awful. But it also leaves a body behind, which is nice. Goreclaw, Terror of Kalsisma. I like this for several reasons. One is a trample enabler. And getting trample of things is like very important, especially if you have a big commander that like doesn't natively have trample. Or playing like a lot of just like big stuff decks that like may not have trample, or if you're playing like a counters like a deck that like you're making these big things, but they may not have trample because you may not have like one of like the trample like enablers from like the Cynic from Ravnica Allegiance on board, that Goreclaw will give them trample whenever he attacks, and also buffs all your big stuff into being already bigger. And he also ramps you. And honestly, it's kind of like the Sorkins and Ceiling, where if it's like, if I have a commander that like he qualifies for, I kind of don't like hate running them, just because it's like he ramps your commander, he essentially cancels out one bit of like commander's attacks if you have a big enough commander. And yeah, no, that's about where I am with them. It's just like ramps, trample enabler, goes into most green jacks. Reclamation Sage, staple of commander, staple of here too. Also notably because it's like you should probably want more naturalized and like disenchant effects like than you normally would think to, because people are running a lot of like instant like fancy like enchantments and stuff, like these like big like effect ones that like can run away with the game. And currently in like on Arena, you don't have a lot of the generic commander answers that usually can deal with that. Things like your utterance and English unmakings and putrefies and things like that, where you don't necessarily have them as readily available. So cards like Reclamation Sage are actually real nice, because it's like, hey, creature decks don't like it, like if you're recurring it or blinking it, it's obviously extra value there. But it's just like, this is just kind of the poster child of like, ooh, look at me, I'm a fancy naturalize. And yeah, it's Reclamation Sage. There's not much to say. But remember, it was reprinted in M19. You can forget that. Like some of these are like just like Reclamation Sage. Yes, it's obviously that like, yeah, this is probably a good card for a Historic Brawl. But honestly, you can probably forget that it existed and it was reprinted. Next up we got Scapeshift, because let me let you into a little secret. If you're playing a 3-color deck and it has green, you can just shove Field of the Dead Scapeshift combo in there most of the time and you'll be perfectly fine, as long as green is one of your primary colors. Like, maybe if you're not running 5-color because it might be a bit rough on your mana to have that color source, but if you're running 3 colors, there's very little reason not to be running Scapeshift Field of the Dead combo. Because, you know, sometimes you just want like a 4-mana spell that just says like, oh hey, if you have 7 more lands in play, add 14 power into your board for 4 mana, and that's good. You didn't hear it from me, but there's no reason not to play Scapeshift combo. Have fun. I don't have anything else to say. It's just like, you should probably do this. Next, we got Vivian Reed. Vivian Reed is some similar reasons to that, like, scape shifting, where it's like, not scape shift, reclamation stage, where it's like, she's just kind of like, I mean, she is green dot planeswalker. Like, primarily increasing her removal spell, it's like, usually what you're using it for, where it's like, okay, she naturalizes or, like, plummet something. But I mean, if you're not, you can just start, like, communing for, like, grabbing creatures and lands out of your library, and honestly, that's everything that green wants to do. And, yeah, she protects herself. She is everything that a green planeswalker wants to be, while also not being annoyingly oppressive, like some planeswalkers. I'm looking at you, Tybalt. But yeah, so it's just kind of like one of those ones where it's like, Vivian fits into almost any green deck. Yeah. And that's why she is like a mythic that I put on there, because it's just a little bit of everything. She like fits that removal slot, she fits that card advantage slot, and yeah. No, and also she does a pretty good job of like protecting herself, and especially like 1v1 commander. I find that in multiplayer like Brawl and stuff, like in commander stuff, like these like planeswalkers have a little bit of a liability because you have like 3 other people ganging up on them, but like in mid-range and control city, planeswalkers are actually very powerful, even ones that aren't like the stupidly pushed ones of late, where it's like getting to that ultimate isn't entirely unreasonable, assuming they don't have like hard removal for it. And that's also very like, because like that's like what, 4 turns away, and yeah, if you don't have to like naturalize or anything, and you have a pretty good board state, like I have ultimated Vivian Reed probably close to a few dozen times, honestly, in just games like over time in both like Singleton and Brawl and things like that, where it's like it's not an impossibility with her, even though it does take a few turns. Like, next one, gold cards. And these ones, like, they have to be very good to really make this list, because the gold cards, you're not going to use them as much, especially if they're rare ones. I put some uncommon ones here because it's like, who doesn't have a giant pile of uncommon wild cards that are burning a hole in your pocket? But here's some good ones. First, Hostage Taker, which is just real nice. I would note that do not use this on your opponent's commander, because they can just put them to the command zone. That said, it can also just remove your opponent's commander as count as a removal spell. Like, unless you want to be using this as just a removal spell, don't necessarily use that on a commander, but don't use it on your opponent's commander, assuming, like thinking that you can cast their commander and take control of it. Because when it becomes exiled, they can't just choose to remove it to their command zone. So, but it allows you to steal any sort of creature or artifact. That's a very blue-black thing, and most decks don't hate doing that. It also takes a threat off the board for a little bit for them. Vraska Relic Seeker is a planeswalker that just does, like, it's very similar to Vivian Reed, but in Golgari. With the added benefit of her -3 hits any creature, not just creatures with flying. And she can also make pirates on her +1 to do Plies of Menace. Also her -3 gives you treasure. So for an extra like black to her mana cost, you get a little bit improved Vivian Reed for 2 colors. Also, it's Pirate Vraska, and Pirate Vraska is rad. Hadana's Climb is a 3-mana enchantment, which many Simic commanders don't mind like adding have some sort of like counter synergies, but that said, like, just in terms of just like overall adding power to your board, where it adds a +1 discount at the beginning of each upkeep, or it's just like, it's a nice like just progressive, like, okay, they will have to deal with this, and oftentimes your opponent doesn't want to spend like a naturalized effects on Hadana's Climb, but like it is a deceptively strong addition to the board state that overall times happens. And if nothing else, it can kind of act as like a 3-turn delayed ramp spell, where it's like, okay, got some extra power, and then I just keep putting things on the ceiling and I flip it into Winged Temple of Vraska, which can, honestly, it can just be a really solid finisher for just like throwing your opponent's, throwing your creatures over your opponent's head. So, it does not look like much, but honestly I feel it's deceptively good. Next up we have Journey to Eternity, which is an enchantment that doesn't, an aura that doesn't do anything, but will flip when that creature dies. So typically you want this in, you want to have some sort of sack outlet, but it flips in this very powerful land, which allows you to pay 3 black-green to just reanimate something. And it's just like, it's this reanimate thing on a land, so it's very hard for them to interact with. And it's, if you can flip this early, it spells major trouble in the long game for your opponent. Shalai, Voice of Plenty, which is a 4 mana, I mean, you know this card. It's essentially, you're mostly using this to protect your board, and notably things like your commander and stuff, where it gives all your stuff hexproof. You can also put counter cylinder stuff, but it's honestly secondary to its, you can essentially, it's like, hey, it's a big flyer that they have to remove before they can remove anything else on your board. So that's about what its point is. Joyra, Weatherlight Captain. In addition to just being like a real solid commander, which is really cool, where it's whenever you cast a historic spell, draw a card. If you look at your deck and like find like, okay, I actually am running a lot of artifacts and legendaries in my deck, I actually want to look at Joyra and running a Joyra in there. Unfortunately, honestly, one thing I would adore having like some of the Modern Horizons commanders to play with, because it's like I would love to have say Weatherlight Captain on Arena to build a say Weatherlight Captain deck, but where I was going, but like there's a lot of cards that will actually end up like triggering her, and like she can just be like a kind of like a neat thing, a nice like engine piece. Also, she's just a cool commander. Honestly, I probably should have removed her from this list, but because she's mostly here because it's like, look at this commander. She's cool. She's fun to play. I actually really like her. She's one of my favorite commanders to play. Just like, it's just a fun one to play around with. But next we have Oath the Fairy, which is kind of like one of those like, it's if you're in white blue and you're playing a Walker commander, Oath the Fairy is almost an auto include. Which, okay, if you're playing white blue and you're playing this commander, your options are you're probably playing Teferi or Dovin. But if you're playing Teferi or Dovin, you should probably play Oath the Fairy. It blink something so you can refresh a walker, or you get an ATB effect, or just untap a land, I guess. But it allows you to essentially activate your activate ability for Planeswalker's control twice each turn. So it is just exceptionally powerful. If you're playing any sort of deck that, like, if you're running like a Super Friends deck, which are quite powerful in this format, yeah, no, it just does a lot. Like, you know, it's not annoying. Double Teferi, and you know what? Yeah, it's just, I don't know what I'm talking about. It's a good card. It slots in almost any. I was about to say for in both Estrid and Anamatu, but wrong format. You can't run in those because those are not on Arena. God, I would love it so much if they started adding commander releases, like even if it's just for like casual direct challenges, just like getting some extra toys to play with this format would be just like, I just want commander. And then we have Rav Kabashen, which ships Mage. Who is a 4/3/3 that gives all your storks a flash. So if you're, it's kind of like a Joyra situation. If you look at your deck and be like, okay, I am running lots of like legendary creatures and artifacts and stuff like that, just all of a sudden giving it flash is actually really neat. And even if nothing else, like he's a 3 power in the air with flash that they're not expecting on. It is kind of good at end of turn, like flashes in to be able to ambush like their planeswalkers and like have an extra like 3 power in the air that they weren't expecting. But also just be able to like get in your even if it isn't for everything, just having that unexpected factor and just being able to leave your mana up is very nice. Especially when it's kind of like you're playing white-blue, like, or white-blue X, and you do want to kind of be that control deck. Tatiova, Benthic Druid, really should go in any deck that has blue and green, but she's a 5-mana 3/3 that whenever land enters the battlefield under control, you draw a card and gain a life. It's a good card. I don't know what else to say. It's a good card. It's only an uncommon. That's about all I have to say about Tatiova. And then finally on this list we have Poison Tip Archer, who is a 4-mana 2 black green for 2/3 with Death Touch and Reach. So hey, it just locks down the board so it can trade with anything. And whenever another creature dies, each opponent loses 1 life. Where it is this kind of like aristocrats piece in a color that doesn't necessarily always have access to aristocrats, but Golgari often already is having lots of things dying, so it has that kind of beats in colors that don't normally get it. And honestly, if you're looking for just like a slot, just like sure up the board, and this card will be much better in once multiplayer comes out, just because it's also very good at deterring attacks. And also, unlike a lot of cards nowadays, which like things like Cruel Celebrant, which only care about your creatures, this is all creatures dying, not just your own. Yeah, and that is it for like my run through of cards to look at if you're looking at getting into Historic Brawl. All about those niche Magic format videos. But seriously, if you're interested in playing some with us, check out the Discord in the link in the description below. Yeah, and yeah, it's a lot of fun, and I really enjoy it. And wow, this video went a lot longer than I expected, but and I'm wandering a bit, but I hope you enjoyed the video. Like, did I miss anything? Did I miss any any all-stars that you would probably really want to look at? And yeah, if you've been building Brawl, what have you been building and playing with? Either normal Brawl or Historic. I'm just having events going after tomorrow. I mean, I know we'll be back on a weekly basis, but I want to play Brawl all the time because honestly, Brawl is the most fun I've had on Arena. It is such a blast, and I can't wait till we get proper multiplayer and all this other stuff. So I'm just super excited. Well, I hope you all have a wonderful night. Have wonderful dreams. And as always, may your stories smile upon you.